when you're feeling the pressure, it means you're not asserting enough pressure. So many times as a CEO, you're feeling the pressure of maybe not a really important exec or employee leaving the company, and what are you going to do now? Or you're not hitting your quarterly revenue numbers, or just different problems, and it accumulates, and you feel like people are pushing you almost to this, like circumstances are pushing you to this edge. And I think the point here is when you're feeling that you're being pushed, it means you're not applying enough pressure backwards.
Welcome to How I Made It in Marketing from Marketing Sherpa. We scour pitches from hundreds of creative leaders and uncover specific examples, not just trending ideas or buzzword-laden schmaltz, real-world examples to help you transform yourself as a marketer. Now, here's your host, the Senior Director of Content and Marketing at Marketing Sherpa, Daniel Burstein, to tell you about today's guest.
The total addressable market, TAM. We sometimes think the bigger the better, right? Hey, it means I can go to potential investors with a more impressive number. But too large of a total addressable market can hinder success. As my next guest says, serving everyone serves no one. Here to share the story behind that lesson and many other lesson-filled stories is Itay Sadan, CEO and co-founder of Duda. Thanks for joining me, Itay.
Thank you. Great to be on your show. Looking forward to chatting about a lot of things related to marketing.
Great. Well, let me tell the audience a bit about your background so they know who I'm listening to. Itay has been a senior software engineer at Amdocs, a director of service innovation at SAP Americas, and for the past 16 years, he's been at Duda. Duda has raised $100 million, including most recently $50 million in Series D growth funding, and Itay himself manages a team of 180 people across the company. So give us a sense, what is your day like as CEO and co-founder?
Yeah, first of all, I wake up in the morning. I live in Boulder. One of the things that I like to do is get my cup of coffee, sit on the sofa, watch the Flatirons, which are the big mountains here in Boulder. And, I kind of calm myself down, look at those mountains and say, they've been here for millions of years. So whatever is going on in the company right before, as I open my inbox, we all have our problems, our challenges, but it kind of grounds you a little bit to know that, whatever the storm is of today, or there's always going to be something else the next day. But those mountains are always there. So it gives you this kind of sense of stability. So I like to do that in the morning and kind of drink my coffee as I start to go through my Slacks and my inbox. At a certain point, depending on my meetings, head into the office. And then kind of my day is really usually packed with meetings, either internal meetings with employees, sometimes, a lot of external meetings with customers, partners. And then, try to head back home, spend time with the family somewhere between kind of 4 to 5, be there when the kids come back from school, all that. And usually kind of log in a bit later and get some more stuff done in the evening after kids are down.
Well, that's a great lesson for all of us. Take a beat in the morning. Look at something eternal and remember, get some perspective. I really like that.
Absolutely.
All right, let's take a look at some of the lessons from some of the things you made. As I mentioned before, I've never worked in any other industry. I've never been a podiatrist or an actuary or something, but I feel like in marketing, we get to make things, and that's what makes it fun. And your first lesson comes from working in a big company. We'll get to some startup lessons, but this first lesson in a big company, you said, no one needs to give you a mandate, even in a big company. Just find your customer's problem and solve it for them. So how did you do this?
Absolutely, yeah. I was working at SAP, as you said, for a while, and I was there in kind of more on the professional services side, working with some really big customers of SAP, and I noticed we were wasting a lot of our time on setting up hardware and setting up software and configuring the software, and very little time on what we actually wanted to prove to the customer in POCs and so forth. And I said that doesn't make sense. I kind of got this idea of let's create kind of an SAP in the box where we bundle hardware. Like I got some partners, IBM, Fujitsu, and HP to kind of provide the hardware. I got different teams to volunteer and install their SAP software on that box. And surprisingly, we sold these boxes to our customers. So this is a very unique position. Maybe only some of the biggest companies can actually sell proof of concept boxes. But the reason why customers bought it is because it saved so much time for them. And they would basically, by using these boxes, you would kind of zoom through the installation configuration, and you could kind of focus right away on building a business case and integrating the software with whatever the company wanted to do. And we ended up selling about 3,000 of these boxes, $10,000 each box, in a matter of like a year or two. So it was a really good success. Salespeople loved it because it put like hardware and software at the fingertips of our customers. But I think the lesson learned here is that you do not need to get a mandate from anyone to build something, even inside the biggest companies. You can, identify, and this is really the entrepreneurial journey, you can identify a problem, a pain point that your customers have, and try to solve it and get people inside the company to see the value because you're helping them do their job better. You're helping salespeople put the software at the fingertips. You're helping product people get their software out. So everybody wanted to contribute to that project, even though it wasn't mandated by anyone. And eventually for me, I kind of saw, that was like pretty cool to build something like this. It's almost, I built a startup inside a bigger company. And eventually I said, why don't I leave, SAP and do my own startup? So that was kind of, the lesson learned there.
Well, let me ask you about that first step out of SAP to build your own startup. I mean, what if people listening right now, if they're working in a big company, what's one of the first 2 or 3 things to get the ball rolling on your own startup? Because when you mention, okay, I'm working SAP, I could do it myself. True, but you're working in SAP, you've got so many resources, right? Budget, all of these things. And then when you step out on yourself, I mean, for me, when I worked and started a small consultancy, it was like, oh, wait, insurance, health insurance, and like taxes and accounting and all these things I never thought of before. So I think when we go from a big company, we want to start a company. Yes, we have that subject matter expertise that we are expert in, and that's what we're actually wanting to build a company for. But there's so many of these different factors to actually start a company. So can you give us a sense of first maybe step or 2 to actually step out of SAP and start a company?
Right. So the first step is actually not a step out. I think the first step is actually to come up with ideas and test those ideas out for as long as you can while you're actually working in a bigger company. Now, I'm not recommending to use, you need to use like your nights, weekends, do it on your own resources. I'm not recommending, use the time that you're actually supposed to be working for your main employee. And, me and my co-founder, we did for a while. We built Duda for a while on our nights and weekends while we were employed by SAP. And why is that important? Because even before Duda, we probably had hundreds of different ideas because we kind of knew we wanted to do something. And it takes time to kind of, make sure that the idea is worthwhile. Because if you leave, I think, too early, what will definitely kill your startup is if you're not funded and, you need to support a family and you're running out of cash. That's definitely going to kill your idea. So being sure that the idea actually has legs of its own and that it's something that is worthwhile leaving your current employer is an important one. And I remember like we thought, hey, even the idea of Duda, we'll start working on nights and weekends and, maybe we'll leave SAP in 2 months and get some funding. It actually took a year and a half of like nights and weekends until it got to a place where it was big enough and we were sure about it and we had investors interested in funding it. And we had a big customer, AT&T, which was the first customer that was willing to pay for it, which is another topic we can get into very soon. I think it's a pretty interesting one.
Yeah, let's talk about how you got to actually getting funding. I mean, the lesson you learned, you said to crank through it, which hearing you talk about the nights and the weekends and all that work involved, and hear
Yeah.
about the entrepreneurial journey makes sense. How did you crank through it and ultimately get to that funding?
Yeah. So it was really hard. It was like 2009, after the 2008 crash. Investors were not in the mode of investing back then. And Amir and I, we were going out and talking to investors. We talked to tens, 20, 30 investors, and we were not getting any traction, anyone who was interested in investing in this idea. Again, we were still working at SAP, but there was already a beginning of a product out there. There was definitely a clear idea, and maybe we had some a few small customers. And I think the main thing was that there was not enough what investors call traction. They like to see the traction. So we all think VCs like to take risk, and they do take risk, but they take a very calculated risk. And usually, and I tell that to a lot of startups that I advise, is you need to be able to show the traction. So if you're going after small businesses, you need to get to a very serious volume of small businesses before a VC actually will fund you. You need to be able to show that this idea that you have, this product that you have, has uh, organic adoption, and SMB a large amount of small customers are interested in. Now, if it's intended for big companies, then you have to have that big brand name. That's also traction. And for us, although we kind of initially wanted the product, we built the product, and we can talk about what the product was for small businesses. The first big customer that came knocking on our door and heard about it was actually AT&T, and a subdivision of AT&T, which was called AT&T Interactive. And they found a lot of value in it, and they wanted to resell it. And I think the moment that we were able to get AT&T, that really triggered everything. That was the moment that investors suddenly were interested. We got term sheets. This is when we decided to leave and gave our notice to SAP. So, that was kind of the moment for us. And the interesting story about AT&T is that we were in negotiations with them for a while. And remember, this was still kind of during my kind of off time from SAP. And at a certain point, we were actually negotiating a contract with them, and someone from vendor management at AT&T contacted the product manager at AT&T and said, "Hey, I went into Ty's LinkedIn, and you don't believe what I saw. He's actually working for SAP. Do you know who you're doing a deal with?" So the product manager there, which I give him a lot of credit until today, said, "Well, if Itai and Amir built such an amazing product while working at SAP, I'm definitely doing a deal with him." So that
That's
that was a
awesome.
funny story.
No,
Yeah.
that's awesome. Well, take us through too. Okay, so SAP, one of the biggest tech companies in the world, right? Now you're working at a startup essentially on the side too. Is there anything you did differently with your strategy at a startup than working at a giant like SAP? Because, for example, when I interviewed Margaret Dawson, the CMO of Chronosphere, one of her lessons was sometimes you need to poke the snake. And she talked about when she was working at the smaller companies, right? She would have to kind of poke the bigger companies. And for example, Cisco, I think, was one of her competitions. They were advertising intelligent network. So her startup's campaign was keep the networks dumb, right? Poking the snake. So for you, Ita, you're working at SAP during the day. To us, it sounds great. Giant budgets, giant brand, giant connections, right? And then at night and the weekends, you've got this, small startup people haven't heard of. Is there anything you had to do differently with your strategy? Or is it just all the same serving customers?
No, it was totally different. And I think after a couple of years in SAP, working with some of the largest brands and seeing a little bit of the dysfunction where,
Yeah.
right hand doesn't necessarily know what left hand is doing. You're talking, things move extremely slowly. Um, this is where I got a little bit of that, passion to work with the small business. The small mom and pop shop, the lawyer, the accountant, the owner of the pizzeria. That you're getting the closest to the person who's actually going to use your software, the person who owns the purse, who's going to actually pay for it if they see value. You're going to see a much quicker decision making. And I love that because I felt like working with large enterprises, you were not, you didn't get access to that level of people. And, the pace was just a different pace, which I was really looking forward to working with.
And you really impact people's lives, right? I mean, obviously, if you help a CMO in a big company, that's great. But I mean, like you said, if you help that couple that owns the pizza shop open 2 more pizza shops, that's transformative.
Absolutely. That's amazing. I think it's really important. Also, another advice there for, maybe people who are thinking about starting out. You need to know that, I've been building Duda for 16 years now. You need to know that you need to have passion for your customers. I've seen entrepreneurs start to build a business in an area where they just thought, oh, there's a huge financial opportunity, big TAM, we're going to make a lot of money. But there's going to be a lot of grinding there. There's going to be tough times. You need to love the customer. You need to be passionate about working with these customers. So don't go into a space just because there's a financial potential there. You need to be spending a lot of time with these customers, learning very deeply what their pain points are, or hanging out in their conferences, writing about it. So you really have to have that passion for the space.
Yeah. So let's get into what you actually serve the customers with and how you kind of adapted that. The product itself, you said that you learned to evolve the product over time to land on the right idea. How did you do that?
Yeah, so it's been a extremely interesting journey. Whatever you think you start a company around, and the problem you're out there to solve evolves over time. Market dynamics change. When we launched the product, it was really around idea A. Today, the product has shifted, and it's a completely different product than what it was in the beginning. Still in a very similar space. So when we launched the product, it was really it was around 2010. iPhone came out in 2007. Android came out 2008. Small businesses were struggling to engage with traffic users who came to their desktop sites from these newer smartphones back then. And we saw how companies like, Amazon created a dedicated mobile site for their mobile users. eBay created one. And it was very clear to us that, small businesses didn't have the budget, the know-how, or the skill set, to build something like that. So that's what we initially set out to solve. We wanted to take their desktop sites and transform them into mobile sites. And we created a super simple experience. It was just give us the URL of your desktop website, click submit. All the magic happens behind the scenes, and you get a mobile site that you can, take it and publish it, or continue to customize. And that I think struck a real pain that small businesses had, and we grew that into 1 million sites in mobile sites in a matter of 2-3 years, with partnerships with companies like I mentioned, AT&T and Google and Yahoo back then, and OpenTable. So we had a lot of early success. But then about 4-5 years in, the proliferation of devices happened, and people had not just mobile, they had tablets, and they had desktops, and they had a browser in their car and a browser on their watch. And it was clear that people didn't want to build a dedicated website for every single device. More or less at the same time, a paradigm called responsive design, that all of us marketers know very well, started rising. And we understood that we need to jump on that bandwagon, because what responsive design basically gave was the ability to build it once and it runs on all these different screens. You don't have to build for a different screen. So we were racing to kind of take our product that was mobile. The company was mobile DNA, mobile first, mobile only at that point, and kind of add these additional screens through this paradigm of responsive web design. A lot of other bigger companies in our bigger CMSs in our space, which were desktop first, were racing the other direction to add mobile. Obviously, we met somewhere there in the middle. And suddenly, 5 years into the company, we're with a product out there competing with public companies like Wix and Squarespace and WordPress. And for the first time, the word differentiation came into our lingo, and the question of, how are we different? Because before that, we were just that mobile player, so we were definitely different. And when you're the leader, and you ask me like, who's your customer, right? A very basic question that a lot of entrepreneurs have a hard time to answer. The most simple question, who's your customer? It's actually a very difficult question to answer because it's never just one type of customer. But we were looking, back then when you're number one, you would ask me who our customer was. Probably the answer would be anybody who wants to use the software. That's when you're the leader. You don't care, and you're growing gangbusters, and but suddenly when there's fierce competition, then like the question of how am I different? Why are people going to use me and not the competitors came into mind. And as we were looking at our user base, we were seeing about 50% were these SMBs that we really built the software for, or that was our initial intention. And the other 50% were web professionals, marketers like you and I, web designers, digital marketers, graphic designers, web developers. And we're looking at the data, and they're actually growing faster than the SMBs for us because they were building multiple sites. And also I think as a DNA of a company, all our engineering is in Israel. We like to build sophisticated stuff because we were kind of being torn apart by these two types of customers where SMBs really wanted, give me the simplest way to publish something online. I want to just click a few things and I'm live with a website. While web professionals want, give me sophistication, give me powerful tools, give me flexibility. So it really tore the company into two parts, addressing these two customers. And we basically made that decision 5 years in that we are going to be a pro-focused company. So we didn't fire the other 50%, but gradually we changed our messaging to be much more, agency, web pro focused. R&D started prioritizing features that web pros wanted. Salespeople knew who they need to speak to. So it really morphed and took the company and propelled it forward to where it is today, where we have, more than 1 million websites and 22,000 digital marketing agencies using the software. And I think if we wouldn't have done, I call it's kind of a pivot, but it's more of a narrowing of your customer base to really hone in on the exact ICP, right? Your ideal customer profile. I don't think we would be around being kind of this generic company that is trying to address everyone and do everything at the same time.
Well, take us through. So it sounds, everything you said sounds good. In theory, sounds good plan,
Yeah.
but how do you make it happen? So take us through as CEO. Was there a specific step or two or three that you took the company through to pivot the value proposition? Because, for example, when marketers hear this, yes, they've got ideas for new messaging, for finding that exclusivity, find those right customers, but there's so many different elements involved. There's getting sometimes a board of directors involved, all the C-suite, as you mentioned, getting actually the people building the product on board, building the right thing, partners, vendors, all of these different elements that are involved when we do want to make that pivot in our value proposition. So, as CEO, can you give us a sense that, there's value proposition workshops, there's all these different steps you could possibly take. What was a key step or two to actually get that whole company on board in the line on pivoting the value proposition from what it was before to what you did after?
Yeah. Well, I can tell you it definitely wasn't easy. Yeah. To start with, the name of the company was Duda Mobile. And me and my co-founder were coming in telling the company, we're no longer doing just mobile. First of all, we're going to go fully responsive and compete with some of these bigger website builders. So that kind of was the first transition from being mobile to being, a fully responsive website builder. And then after that, we came and said, hey, that's not enough. We really need to hone down on our ideal customer profile, which is this web professional. I think these changes, it doesn't happen overnight. It, and you can't do it overnight, especially when there's real revenue. Could be, we were already making millions of dollars servicing small businesses and web professionals. So, there's no way in the world where you can just, cut 50% of your revenue. So you have to transition over time. You also want to get some confidence around this decision. So it's a gradual change. I think, initially when we came and probably talked to the management team and persuaded them, it was not an easy conversation, but it's really, I think it's gradual. You talk to your management, you get them behind it, you talk to your board, you prepare, you think about the communication, you discuss it with the rest of the team, and eventually you get everybody on board, especially if it makes sense. And usually there are some already challenges looming that people are seeing, right? Where, we started seeing at that time, when we moved from mobile into fully responsive, we started people seeing people and customers and partners asking about responsive web design. So you can't put your head in the sand and say, this change is not happening. You can't say AI is not happening and I'm going to be just doing what I've been doing. I think this is a key, a really important point here, that this is first and foremost, this is the job of the founders. You're steering the ship, ensuring, that product market fit, that the product that you're building fits with what the market is asking for, is the job of the founders. And it constantly changes. So the fact that, we had product market fit early on, we lost it along the way because market dynamics, things change. So you constantly need to make sure that, the ship is aiming at the right destination and with the right coordinates. And then, I remember, until today, the arguing within the marketing team when you're introducing, and it doesn't have to be a complete pivot. It could be introducing a new product. Nobody wants to give it real estate on the homepage, right? Everybody's incentivized to drive revenue from the existing product. So you start with giving it a little bit of space, and you start to see some traction. And over time, the second product takes 50% of the real estate. And when it's by that point, when it's 50% of the revenue, it's very clear, and kind of, the initial product becomes legacy and the new product takes over. But it's definitely, a shift, and it takes time, takes persuading people. But eventually you need to prove it with traction, again, with showing customers are adopting it and growing. And, there were tough, from a revenue perspective, there were tough times where, about 2 years, and I think that was more or less between 2014 and 2016, where, our revenue grew like this for product A, and it started kind of flattening, and the top line revenue of the company was not growing for about 2 years. And we had this newer product, right? The responsive design, that was growing, but it was still small, right? It was still small. And it took almost 2 years where we got to that 50-50 point in terms of revenue. And it was, for anybody internal who saw how the new product was growing at the pace, it was clear that this is going to be the future of the company. But it was not, it took time. Like, we couldn't get, in those 2 years, we couldn't go out and raise more money from investors because, overall top line was still flat. And so it was a lot of belief from the people inside the company, and that we're definitely in the right direction. We need to, put our heads down, execute, make sure the newer product is the majority of the revenue. And then we continued, raising more money. But that, at that point, it was already clearly around this newer product that was the future.
All right. Well, in the first half of How I Made It in Marketing, we talk about lessons from the things that we make, like Ite, they talk about making a new product, making a new value proposition. But in the second half of the episode, we talk about lessons from the people we made them with, because that's what we get to do. We make things, we make them with other people. But before we get there, I should mention that the How I Made It in Marketing podcast is brought to you by MechLabs AI, the parent company of Marketing Sherpa. Marketing Sherpa has teamed up with MechLabs AI to produce a research study, and we are granting AI engineering vouchers to eligible companies. Could be yours. Learn more at mechlabs.com/5K voucher. That's MECLABS.com, the number 5, the letter K, and the word voucher. Okay, let's talk about some of the people you collaborated with to build these things. You mentioned Oren Zeev, the one of your first seed investors and the founder of Zeev Ventures. And you mentioned from Oren, you learned that speed in decision-making is very important. So how did you learn this from Oren?
Yeah, already, I think from the first day that I met Oren. So this was very early on, as I mentioned, just at that point when we were very close to closing that deal with AT&T. It was pretty clear that it was going to happen. And we already got a term sheet from another set of investors. And then someone introduced me to Oren, and Oren wanted to invest. And I said, you know what, Oren, I think, we already have a term sheet. I'm glad to meet you for coffee, but, we're probably going to sign this term sheet that we got. He said, let's meet for coffee and see where it goes. And over that coffee meeting, it was very clear to me that the value that Oren is going to provide to the company is leaps and bounds more than the other investors who we had a term sheet with. And he basically said, if I can turn a term sheet and wire the money to you in 24 hours, which was unheard of, because our conversations with other VCs took weeks and months and due diligence. And this guy was willing to, after a coffee meeting, was willing to wire money in 24 hours. And again, we clicked, we bonded in that meeting, and I said, yeah, we'll go with you. And exactly as he said, 24 hours later, we had money wired into our account. We signed contracts, and it was done. And until today, this was 15 years ago. Oren is a very close advisor and mentor to myself and to the company. He's on the board. I still stay in touch with him. We talk probably every 3 weeks or so. So just showed me, like, back to your original question, like that moving fast, especially when it's not common in this specific industry to move fast in the VC industry. People take their time, they do their due diligence. It could be a very significant advantage. And I've seen the opposite, moving away to other examples of how moving slow kills deals. We probably, a lot of us know that, but we've had deals that we worked on with customers, partners for months, and they took longer for different reasons. And as they take longer, executives and champions leave the company, and suddenly strategies change, and COVID happens, and and financial markets change. So a lot of things that are maybe not directly related, but indirectly related to a deal, to a partnership, could happen when it takes just too long. So overall, the recommendation is, try to get things to happen as quickly as you can, so those unpredicted variables don't come into the picture and sway everything in another direction.
So I want to ask you about that speed lesson in just a moment, because I think we can learn a lot for our customers. But first, let me just unpack this. This story blows my mind, okay? You had a cup of coffee and 24 hours had funding. I've never heard of this. How did boards and lawyers and other investors, how did nothing slow you down? The lawyers, how did they not slow you down for getting this funding in 24 hours? I don't understand.
Yeah. Term sheets are it's a very basic template. There's open source templates for term sheets. There's no need to negotiate at least series seed type of term sheets. He said, find any term sheet that you have on, like, let's just take something open source that a lot of smart people worked on, and we'll use that. We don't need obviously you need to just agree on a price. But
beyond the price, he sent you the money within 24 hours. Wow, that just blows my mind. That's like crazy.
This is one of his key advantages, and he's a one-person venture capitalist, and that's what he likes. he worked previously in other firms where you need to drive consensus, you need to persuade other
Right.
people, right? It's not your decision. There's a deal team. He works alone. He doesn't even have a assistant to schedule meetings for him. He just does everything alone, and that allows him to operate really quickly.
That is fantastic. But let me ask, okay, the bigger lesson here now,
Yeah,
how we apply this to our customers. So I wonder if you take that same speed approach when it comes to customer onboarding. Because, for example, when I wrote a case study about Talkspace, they tested an app activation flow to speed up things like videos or even something as simple as a loading bar animation. And those tweaks led to a 60% increase in conversion. So I always like to look at these things that we experience in our personal life, like this speed to market with this super fast investor, to see how can we use this then with our customers. So is there any lesson you learned there in terms of speed when it comes to onboarding?
yeah, yeah. We actually have an objective that is a company OKR for our account managers, and their goal is with every deal that gets signed during the onboarding, they need to get the customer to build 10 sites within 3 months. So we learned that, and many times this onboarding requires integration. So there's a bit of work that needs to be done before you can actually go live. And what we learned is that customers who get to that number, to the 10 site threshold, are probably going to stay with you for the long term. Now, if you let the time lapse and you let them move in the, you just sign the deal and you let them do the integration on their own time and you don't put any pressure on that. Again, champions change, strategies change, they move and focus on other things, and many of these deals eventually churn. But when you can get to that threshold that we've found is important for our company, and every company should find what it is for them, you have a much higher chance of retention and success with that customer.
Or let's talk about life as a CEO. There is a lot on your back. I love how you mentioned just drinking a cup of coffee, looking at the timeless mountains in the morning to kind of relieve some of that pressure. But you said, here's one lesson that you learned and lived by. If you are feeling the pressure, it means that you are not applying enough pressure. You mentioned you learned this from Ben Horowitz of Andreessen Horowitz. How did you learn this lesson from Ben and how do you live it?
Yeah. Yes, I did get to meet Ben once during one of our series. I think it was a Series B funding. They didn't end up investing, but I did have a really interesting conversation with him. And this specific point around if that he made it, he actually wrote that in his book, The Hard Things About Hard Things, and it's a point that really resonated with me. When you're feeling the pressure, it means you're not asserting enough pressure. So many times as a CEO, you're feeling the pressure of maybe not a really important exec or employee leaving the company, and what are you going to do now? Or you're not hitting your quarterly revenue numbers, or just different problems, and it accumulates, and you feel like people are pushing you almost to this, like people circumstances are pushing you to this edge. And I think the point here is when you're feeling that you're being pushed, it means you're not applying enough pressure backwards. And many times I feel that is the case. So if I am being pushed by even a board member about, hey, like, you guys are not doing this, you're not hitting your numbers, you know, it's okay to be really obviously stand your ground, explain what are the things that you are doing to change the circumstances, what is the strategy going forward, how you will get the company out of the situation where it is right now. That's just one example, but I don't know, this is something that works for me, that sometimes I feel like if I'm under a lot of pressure, it's because I'm letting the circumstances influence me and I'm not doing enough to impact the circumstances around me.
Yeah, when I like hearing that lesson because to me, really if you break down what a CEO's job is, one of the core functional things must be setting the vision and navigation, making sure you're heading in that direction. And so if you, to your point, you're feeling so much pressure, maybe, you're not setting the offense and setting the direction, saying we're going
Exactly.
here. You get all these other voices in.
Exactly. I think it's exactly the point. You're like too much on defense and not enough on the offense. I think that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, but that also brings up part of the pressure is, so again, the CEO sets that direction, then it's got to get set, especially in a smaller company. I think part of the pressure comes to the workload too. So I wonder how you decide when and how to delegate. So for example, when I interviewed Rich Davis, the founder and chief creative officer of ThinkSpark, one of his lessons was don't look at delegating as a task, look at it as a skill. And he told the story that he realized he really didn't have that skill very good. So that's what he focused on, was improving that skill, getting coaching. And that was a real big focus for him. So he could actually get good at delegating, because that was, other than setting the vision, delegating is really a key thing for a CEO. And a startup sometimes just try to wear all the hats and do it all. So as the we talked about you're at SAP, you're just doing it on the side with your co-founder. I'm sure you're doing almost everything yourself. As you're growing the company, how did you decide when and how to delegate, and how did you get good at it?
Yeah. I think that's, I like delegating. It is, I think where I feel like when you have strong people underneath you, um, they do the job better than you do. And hopefully you're hiring the right people who are going to do a better job initially as a CEO, you're doing a lot, especially in an early stage company. So you might be the salesperson, the marketer, even the QA person, or the engineer. And you need to give those hats away as the company grows. So when you feel that there's enough happening where you're not doing a good job in any one of these fields, it is, I think it's very natural to hire someone and give one of these hats away to someone who would do a better job than you do. And over time, you're hiring enough people where, you're left more with the strategy hat and the vision hat, and you have a strong CMO underneath you, a strong chief revenue officer, a CTO who are taking care of their things. I think what I feel is when I am getting sometimes too deep in a certain area, it is because the person who's in charge of that area is not doing a good enough job. So I think, again, my modus operandus is definitely delegate wherever I can. And if I feel like I'm spending too much time in an area, it's usually not because I don't want to delegate. It's because the person whose role is it to do that job is not doing a good enough job.
Yeah, that person isn't playing offense, right? We all, it's not just the CEO. We all need to play offense in a sense, right? Or we'll feel the pressure.
Well, I think it's it could be for different reasons. Sometimes, as company grows, people who are good in a certain stage, like bringing the company to 10 million, are not the right people to bring the company to 50 and 100 million, especially when their staff grows and they haven't done it before. So at any point, you have to assess the team that you have around you and see, are they carrying their weight?
Well, let's talk about one last lesson here. You kind of mentioned it briefly before, but solve the right problems for the right customers. Serving everyone serves no one. You said you learned this from your co-founder, Amir Glatt, who's also the CTO of Duda. So I wonder if you could take us into, we mentioned this briefly before, but how did you work with your co-founder to, make this is a monumental decision, walking away from a customer base, specifically too, as you just mentioned, as a company grows, you've got to get different skill sets to get to the next level. You two started working very early in the process. So take us through kind of that co-founder relationship and how you two work together on such a momentous decision.
Right. Yeah. So the interesting thing is that I know Amir, my co-founder, since high school. We went to,
Did you work at SAP together as well? Or you were talking about SAP?
That's.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So we were started, we were at the same high school. We weren't friends back then, but we knew each other. And it so happened that both of us started learning computer science and mathematics in the same university in the same year. So that's kind of when we became much better friends and eventually roommates, college roommates. And after college, he went and worked for a few startups. I went and worked for some other companies. Eventually, he joined SAP, brought me into SAP to interview for a role. He thought I would be a really good fit. I relocated from Israel to the Bay Area with SAP. I then brought him into my team, so we were kind of playing catch there. And eventually, both of us were here in the Bay Area working for SAP, and that's the story we talked about before. And left to start Duda. So we know each other for a very long time, and I think that is the basis and the foundation for the company and the trust between us. I know that his decisions, he's the CTO and runs the entire engineering product team. I trust 100% his decision. He trusts my decisions on the business side. We don't have to talk every day. There could be a full week where we don't talk, but we're very aligned. And I think we have very similar values. And we, I don't remember in 15 years of us ever having, a significant argument. So we are really kind of two minds think alike. He's really strong on the engineering side. I kind of shifted over time, when we started the company, more from the engineering into kind of the business side. So we very much complement each other. And then I think we every once in a while we talk about strategy, we talk about the direction of the company, we consult each other a lot about different things. And I think things, as I talked about before, that product market fit, future strategy, product roadmap, these are, I don't get into the weeds in the product roadmap, for example. I trust him, but we set the course, we set the coordinates together. We say, this is where we want to go. This is, the future products that we want to build. Here's the opportunities. We persuade each other that this is the right direction to take. This could be ongoing conversations. And eventually, when we decide that this is what we're going to do, we go and persuade the management team, and then it cascades down. And at the execution part of actually building the product, this is where I'm much less involved. I'm kind of more involved in the decision making and the strategy. We are going to build, X, and then I kind of leave it to him and his team to make that happen.
Well, we are going to build X, specifically also getting to how you switched who you're building that X for. We talked about changing that ideal customer. I wonder, how do you get to actually really learn about, know the ideal customer, how you could best serve them, right? Because, for example, when I interviewed Asaf Raz, the VP of marketing at Agora, one of his lessons was, one of the most important things about a marketing executive is to know your market really well, knowing the actual people. And one way he did that is he launched a podcast with his ideal customer, and he would be interviewing them to get them to know them on a personal level. So you talked about this very big strategic shift from one customer set to another. You also talked about, okay, you understood obviously at the 30,000 foot level, seeing the whole market dynamics and markets moving and all that. But earlier you kind of briefly mentioned something I'm interested in. You said really care about, be passionate about your customers and go to their conferences and all these sorts of things. So I wonder if you can give us specifics about how you specifically, or if it's you and Amir, or you and the whole team, how do you actually, what things do you do to get to know that customer on a personal level, especially when you're going through this shift from, hey, it's going to be from one customer set to another. We're going to bet the whole company on this.
Right. Yeah. So I think there's a lot of ways where you get this deep and profound understanding of who your customer is and what they want. Starting from, talking to your customers. I definitely have, closer customers, closer partners that they're a text message away, a telephone away, that I can reach out to them and we talk. And I sometimes send them, hey, take a look at this product, this other company. What do you think? Is this interesting? Is this an area where Duda should get into? Try it out. And they might try it out and give me feedback in a couple of days. So definitely have some very close conversations with some of our closer partners. We have this other thing, which is an idea board, where customers can come and suggest ideas, features that they would want to see in the platform, and then other customers can vote on it. And that's a very important source of information for our product managers, and I look at that as well. And this is how you stay attuned to what your customers are asking for, right? Because if they come, sometimes there's some good ideas, and we'll talk about that, can come from you internally, but your customers know best what they need. And if they come up with the idea, and then you see, hey, there's 700 votes because we have 22,000 customers for this feature, we should probably build that because all these people are, voting for it. And we actually also have an objective around taking like the product team has an objective around taking ideas from the idea board. They need to reach a certain score. So, for example, in a year, they need to maybe reach a score of 1,000, and each vote is considered one. So we are addressing the direct requests coming from customers via this idea board. Customers, and it's also nice, customers feel like they have the opportunity, like, to influence. And you can see customers telling other customers, hey, I just put up this idea. If you care about it, there's all kinds of forums and stuff where they're trying to get others to vote for those ideas. We do conferences where we run our own conferences. One in the US, one in the EMEA. The next one's going to be in September in Amsterdam, where we're very close with we bring our existing customers, partners to these conferences, and we spend real time with them. We get feedback from our support team that is dealing with tickets, and so I think there's a lot of sources of feedback that you can take into the company to make decisions about what you're going to build. But I want to put that aside because I think that's really important, and we do a lot of that. There's the things that your customers will come back to you and tell you this is a good idea. But my experience is that, if you have a horse, they will tell you that they want a faster horse. They won't tell you, oh, go build, a car. So the things where it's kind of a leap in innovation to take you from one place to another, that won't come from your customers because they won't necessarily expect you to deliver that type of functionality for them. It might be a completely different product. And I think this is where it needs more to come from internally, from within the company, identifying opportunities where you can take the company to, like maybe an additional product. And so these are kind of the leapfrog type of ideas. And we do those as well. And this is where we really try to kind of surprise our customers and be very innovative. We've done a lot of that, in the last year or two around AI, right? There's a lot of new functionality that we came out that I don't think our customers expected, and kind of blew their minds away. And it really positioned us as kind of a cutting edge innovator in the area of AI, and a true AI partner and advisor to our customers, where they know, oh, Duda has our back in terms of AI, because they're like leaps and bounds ahead of the curve there. So we know we have, whenever one of our, like a CEO at one of our companies asks, like the person who works directly with Duda, our champion, like, hey, what are we doing with AI? I want them to be in this position to say, oh, we partnered with Duda and they are taking care of it. So many times our customers are looking at us to make sure that they themselves stay innovative through this partnership.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. When it comes to incremental change, customers telling us is probably a good venue for it. But when it comes to truly transformational change, it's understanding those customer pain points and being close enough to understand them, but then guiding them. And that's what they're really looking for. Hey, let's take you to the next place.
Exactly.
Well, we talked about so many lessons and stories from your career, Ite. If you had to break it down, what are the key qualities of an effective marketer?
Yeah. I think the best marketers that I've seen have a combination of two things. One, they have a very deep understanding of the product. And the second is they have a very deep understanding of the customer and the pain points. and being able to tie both of these things of how this product that was built by the company is solving these pain points, is providing value. You really have to really understand both of these worlds in a very deep way. Now, I've seen marketers that are strong in one, maybe they have a strong understanding of the market, of the industry, but they don't understand, they haven't spent enough time really using the product. And I've seen the other where, people who are more on the technical side, but have a hard time translating it into business value. Again, the strongest marketer is really has deep and profound understanding of both worlds and is able to bridge that in order to show real ROI, real value to the customer.
Well, thanks for sharing all the lessons and stories from all the different worlds you lived in your career. I learned a lot, Itay.
Yeah, no, this is fun. We should definitely do that again. Thanks for inviting me for your show.
I'm sorry, go on.
I just said thanks for inviting me to your show.
Absolutely. Thanks for being here. And thanks to everyone for listening.
Thank you for joining us for How I Made It in Marketing with Daniel Burstein. Now that you've gotten inspiration for transforming yourself as a marketer, get some ideas for your next marketing campaign from Marketing Sherpa's extensive library of free case studies at marketingsherpa.com. That's marketingsherpa.com.